Welcome back to this episode of the Women and Money Cafe. Now, if you've been listening to us for a while, you might remember that last year, Michelle and I did an episode 34, which said, how much do you want to retire and when do you want to retire? It's the wrong question. And that's a cracking episode, and you should go back and listen to it. However, a year on, it did occur to us, we never actually told you how to figure out how much you need to retire, because it is kind of important. Episode 34 is critical. You need to listen to that first. But we thought we'd follow up with this one and put some numbers and some ideas to you on how to work out what you actually need to be able to retire. So with me today is my partner in crime, Michelle.
Hello.
All right. My other partner in crime, Sarah.
Hello, hello.
All right. Thank you, ladies, for joining me on the sofa today for this episode. So how to go about figuring out what you need to retire on. It's a tricky one, isn't it, Michelle?
It's a really tricky one because generally when we do it, we're going to be asking people who may be in their 20s, 30s, 40s, what do you want to retire on? What income do you want? And they'll look at you and go, I have absolutely no idea. That's years away. And then we have to go back and explain, well, in order to work out what we need to do now, we need to have sort of an end point in mind. And I think that is a very big mindset shift that anybody, because it just seems years and years away. And why would I think about it? But it is so important to know an idea now so that you can do the planning later.
All right. And so Sarah, then, like Michelle was saying, sometimes it can seem like such a far off, distant, remote event. What's the point of thinking about it today? Have you got any sort of nuggets of wisdom to help motivate listeners?
Well, this was something that was told to me many years ago. And if you think about how old you are now, and if you have got an idea of when you'd like to retire, even if you just take it to your state pension age, which might be 68-ish, and think, how many paydays have you got left? So, if you get paid monthly, times that by 12, number of years until you want to retire. So how many paydays have you got left? And how many paydays have they got to pay for? So if you retire at 68 and you survive 20 years till you're 88, you've got 20 times 12 paydays. Have you got 20 times 12 or more paydays to save for those paydays?
Hey, that's
a bit.
That's quite sobering, really, isn't it?
It's a bit sobering, yes.
But it does help you think, okay, I should be doing something.
Yeah, I think so. What we're going to do over the next 30 minutes or so, listeners, is we're going to give you some general rules of thumb. And some of these you might have heard before. And we're going to give you some stats that might be helpful. And then we're going to talk you through some ideas on how you can start to work out this number for your personal situation, because we can give you averages, but you're listening to our podcast, which clearly shows that you are not average in a good way. So we'll talk you through some of the things that we do, and hopefully that they will help you. So when we talk about rules of thumbs and averages, I think there's some cracking research out there. And I know, Michelle, you've got some examples that you share with your clients on a regular basis, don't you?
Yeah, so obviously when I've asked that question and they sit and look at me blankly and go, I have absolutely no idea how much I'll need. One, we discuss what their current living is like, their standard living is like, how much that costs. But I think even then, it's quite hard to visualize what you might need. So there is a retirement living standard, and it's all based, it's redone every year, I think. So it gives you an idea of what you might look like. So if you wanted to have a minimum income in retirement for a single person, you'd be looking at £12,800 a year. So that it says it covers all your needs with some leftovers for fun. And obviously the assumptions that are used they're not generous. It is covering basic needs. Then you've got a moderate one, which is more financial security and gives you a little bit more flexibility. So obviously there's a little bit more on food, there's a little bit more on holidays, and that's 23,300 that you need a year for a person. Now, if you want a more comfortable one, which I'll say is what most people would actually want to go for, gives you more financial freedom, more luxuries, more on food. So it almost triples what you spend on food a month. and gives you more holidays, gives you more clothing, gives you more per birthday present that you buy for people. So there's loads of factors that go into this. But for a comfortable retirement for a single person, you're looking at £37,300 a year you would need. And I think the other things to kind of bear in mind is when you talk to clients, they very much underestimate how many years you'll be retired for. It's actually a very big chunk of lives, and can be like 30, 40 years in many cases. So that's also something to factor in.
All right, they're really interesting figures, those. I will put a link to the Retirement Living's Index, is it?
Retirement living standards.
Standards in the show notes for everybody to go and click on and have a look. So thanks for that, Michelle. Sarah, is there anything you'd like to throw in there?
Ooh, it's worth having a look, but I think it's as we said, it's you've got to take it back to yourself. You'll know the kind of person you are, what life's thrown at you, and how that's made you feel. And you can start off thinking your retirement's going to look like this, need to look like this, and then something will change. So we'll cover that, but you need to be able to adapt to change. I think you've covered that in episode 34, how people react in different situations. But if you just have a basic rule of thumb and don't get too stuck on it, then it just means that if you've got something to focus on and say, well, okay, if I really just want to better live and survive and live in a basic way, then at least you've got something to aim for.
Mm.
And don't get too stressed out about it, but just use them as things as guides and things to aim for and motivate you at this stage.
No, I think that's a really good point. And along with what Michelle was saying, like when we sit down with clients and they've figured out what they want, they've told us what they want, we've got away and calculated what they need to do to make that happen. And then they see that number and they're like, holy cow, how am I going to do that? All right, spoiler alert, very few people have everything in place that they need at the start. It's about starting somewhere and building on it. If you've got it all in place already, then fantastic. But if you haven't, don't be disheartened. Most of us don't. It's about doing a little bit at a time.
Yeah.
So along with the research Michelle's got, another good organization to look at is Fidelity. Do really good research on this stuff as well. And one of the things that they've said is that if you want a basic lifestyle in retirement, you're going to need to have about 4 times your salary saved when you hit 68. And then they'll throw the state pension on top of that. If you want an average lifestyle, at age 68, you have to have 7 times your salary saved. And if you want luxury, then it's 11 times that you need to have saved. So they are some of the general rules of thumb. Now, I know that when I did a bit of research for this episode, like everybody, I just went and typed it into Google. You can go and do it too. One of the websites that I brought up was the Money Helper website. And it does then link through to, is it Pension Works? That's, the question is, so how much do I need? And it gave you some good information. I clicked on the link and it takes you through and I'm like, oh, bloody hell. It wants me to do a budget. But no, don't be disheartened by my bloody hell bit, because I think this is a really good starting point. And it's how I do it with all my clients, trying to figure out what do you want in retirement. Well, let's have a look at your lifestyle right now. What do you spend your money on right now? All right. When you're not working the way you're working right now, what are you likely to spend more on? What are you likely to spend less on? How's that going to change? And what are you going to be doing with your time? And that starts to help you get an idea of what your future budget spending plan would look like. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I think that's very much what you would start with, because everyone's different. We all have different interests. We all have different likes. We all have different things which are important to us. And whereas life will change, you do have to start somewhere.
Yeah. How do you approach it with your clients, Sarah?
Oh, very much the same way. I start off by, before I get down to the practical budget stuff, I just say, what really matters? What would you really like to be able to do once you're retired or in your later life? Various things will come up, and then if you just open up the conversation and let it flow, then usually you get to some little nugget or dream or something that they really, really would love to be able to do. And then we come back and say, okay, so what are we spending our money on now? Will you spend any money towards that dream now, or do we? And then start getting down to the budgets and the nitty-gritties of today and seeing how it will change.
Right. Do you find as well, though, there's a lot of moving parts, isn't there, in retirement, trying to figure out what you need? Because one, it's like, well, when am I going to retire? Well, let's pluck a number out of the air and just say 65. But my state pension doesn't kick into 68, and my final salary scheme kicks in at 62. So you've got all this money landing at different times and in different shapes. And then we get to 60, whatever the heck it was that I wanted to retire at. Like, yeah, do you know what? I think I'm going to go off and open up a surf shop now as well. So I've got income from that. And it's just, there's no absolutes about it. There's too many moving parts, and it can make it really difficult to conceptualize it.
Yeah.
Is that what you find, Michelle?
Yeah, it is very much. It is very difficult to actually, and I think, as we all know, whenever we write a financial plan for somebody, a retirement plan, it's actually out of date the next day because something may happen, something may change in their life. And that's very much something you've got to cover with clients, because otherwise you can't guarantee any of this. It's all based on assumptions and on our expectations of what might happen. And sometimes with clients, because we have this conversation about what they want, how they want it to look, and they may not see the importance of starting to fund things early. And that can be quite damaging to any plan for retirement. So what I will sometimes do is take what they have. Well, I do this a lot for clients, and I show them what that would give them in retirement. If you just stay with what you have, this is what you'll have to live on. And they look at you and just go, but I can't live on that. That's got to be the motivation to go forward. And I think many people in our generation do have unhealthy expectations because their parents are in receipt of generally some really good final salary pensions.
Yeah.
We aren't. Our generation doesn't have the same level of guaranteed income that our parents may have. And a lot of them do. That generation have had a lot because of pension. So they seem to think that they should have this. And you're trying to say to them, no, you're not going to, but that's not a bad thing. That's not your fault. It's nothing you've done. It's just that the situation is different. And we need to work a bit harder and a bit smarter to work out how to do that for you, because we're not going to have the same as our parents. But that puts a lot of pressure on people. And I think that makes people, I don't know, think that they've failed. So then they kind of want to give up. And you go, no, we can do this. You just need to get all those factors that you want in place. This is where you are now. This is what your pension you have now would give you in retirement. You want to make it more than that. That's our motivation.
I think that's a really good point. I love that about how we've got our expectations mixed up with previous generations. So as I listen to you talk there, do you know one of the things I'm thinking about for the listeners is we're talking about trying to figure out how much you want. I'm wondering, if I wasn't a financial advisor and I wasn't working with a financial advisor, would a more realistic way to approach this, would, especially in the context of how we're all going to live going forward, is if I sit down and work out what's the absolute bare minimum I need coming in to be able to exist. And because the chances are our generation, younger generations, are going to be working a lot longer. So we're going to have other sources of income as well. So this is the figure. If I have that coming in at X age, that means if I'm doing a job and I hate it, I can chuck it in and I can go and find something else to do. What do we think about that?
Yep. Sounds good.
It's almost like a skinny fire number.
Yes. Yeah. What's the absolute minimum you need to just survive?
So what was that basic number you were talking about, Michelle, from the first set of research?
The first set of research, so that would be 12,000. So it covers your needs and leaves you with some fun. Now, that estimates £54 a week on food. It estimates you don't have a car.
Wow.
You have a holiday in the UK. £580 a year for clothing and footwear, and £20 for a birthday present. So they're averages, but that is, as you say, the minimum.
That was 12,800 in today's terms, right? And the state pension in today's terms is 10,600. So you've nearly all of us have nearly achieved the absolute basic lifestyle. So I'm hoping that's a bit of a motivator for people to realize that you've nearly achieved step one. And with your existing provision, you might have actually met step one. So you're actually building now and working towards step two. I'm hoping that's giving people a bit more encouragement about this whole retirement and saving and pension thing.
Yes. Yes.
I think the state pension is quite undervalued, and I think people have perceptions because unless you know the number, obviously we know the number because we talk about it today, we're dealing with it all the time. But there is this misconception that actually it's nothing, it's pittance, it's not going to give me anything. Actually, when you tell them the number, £1,600 a year, they sort of, oh, okay. So if I want 20,000 a year, that's half of it already from say age 68. And again, there's this, because it's not something that's in our world every day, it's not taught to everybody. But when you do know, it's actually a really important part of any retirement.
Yeah, so just to say again, that's over £250 a week, people.
Yeah.
You've already got that in the bank. So that's a nice step up, as well as then whatever existing provision you've got. So Sarah, anything you want to throw in here?
When I talk to clients, I always talk about time differences, as in things, do they know things they want to do? So we've touched on the fact that a lot of people are working longer, but there's so many people now, certainly a lot of my clients are either what we would call a semi-retirement, so they're still working part-time. But that part-time income could be a little bit, or sometimes it ends up being quite a lot. Or they go, I think you mentioned starting a surf shop. The amount of people now who start their own little business. And so sometimes the planning is actually factoring in to have a little bit of money to start that little business when they immediately retire. But then that little business starts giving them a supplement income as they go through. A lot of people worry about how much they're going to need as they get much older, about care and all that sort of thing. So whilst we're quite fit and well, and we can choose how we want to live and how much we want to spend and what we want to do with it within our budgets, it's fine. But when you get to the point where you might need to spend money on things that have become necessity because maybe you're not so well or your partner's not so well, that's when the costs can go up depending on your own financial circumstances and what benefits you may or may not be entitled to. And that's the bit that's really difficult to plan for.
No, I think that's a good point. I think it's called an Encore Career. When you finish one job and then you like, but I've always wanted to open a cake shop, so I'm going to go and do this now. Or I've always wanted to learn how to code, so I'm going to go and do that now. And these things, I think we touched on this on episode 34, is that traditionally we've seen retirement as like a cliff edge. I worked at X and then all income stops. And so I just need the pension income. And it turns out that you were going to go and open a cake shop, a surf shop, or learn to code or whatever. And all of a sudden there's more money coming in. Now, if we knew there was more money coming in, going to be coming in, we could have moved that cliff edge, which wasn't really a cliff edge, further, closer to you. So it's being mindful of what you think your life might, there's a lot of guessing what life might be like for you in the future, because if it is your intention that you're going to stop completely and you're never going to work again, that's great. But if you think there's a chance, you know what, I would be bored silly. I will be going off and finding something to do and I will make some money somehow. Oddly enough, I've got a client in this situation at the moment that's going to walk dogs. And I'm like, okay, so how many dogs are you going to walk? How much are you going to make a week? And we made some guesses. And she's a radiologist and she just doesn't want to work any longer than she has to. So because she's told me about the dog thing, I'm factoring that into the cash flow now, which means that we're getting to move her stop being a radiologist date closer. I'm not going to call it retirement because she's going to be a dog walker. But it's having this information, just like I said, too many moving parts. You can see why people's heads just...
Yeah, yeah. It also actually shows why, if you can, and it is good to try and get some help and advice, but also to have another good look at the figures and things at least once a year, because life changes, how you feel changes, and all those, your aspirations change. So it's a moving target. I think we've probably covered that quite enough. It's very fluid, just like life.
I like that. It's fluid. I think maybe the other thing that came to my mind when we were talking about doing this episode is that I'm sure you've both seen this in clients as well and in people that you know, where they are throwing money at their pension and they are saving like crazy. And how do you know when you've got enough? You've got people that could have retired already or could have slowed down, but because they don't actually know what that money can do for them, they don't know what's possible, they carry on doing it. And it's like, well, how do you know when to stop or when you've got enough or when you can slow down? Any thoughts
That's
on how
really, yeah, no, it is really important.
Yeah.
Because clients, I've had the situation actually quite a few times where clients come with, I have this pension, I have this, I have these assets. I hate my job. I don't want to carry on doing it, but I know I've got to. And actually, when we've gone through the process, I can think of 3 clients straight away that I've gone, you can retire. You have enough to retire. One, that's one of the most rewarding things I think we can ever do, because you're actually showing somebody that they have what they need and the options available to them. And that's the really powerful thing. But again, and that is where we come in, I think, Sarah, because until you work with us, we can show you what that means and we can show you how that income can last. I had one client who she retired. So for 2 years, she didn't work at all. And she was loving it.
Is this temp lady? The lady that does temping?
And then she's gone back temping. Yeah. And she literally just temped because she says, I have no commitment to them. I'm earning a living and I can go to different people and do different things. And that works for her really well. And if she doesn't want to work for a few months, she doesn't have to. But the plan that we put in place has enabled her to do that. And that's probably one of the, like I say, the most valuable thing. I have another client again. She retired for 3 years. She's now just gone back to work full time because she said, I was bored, really. I really didn't know what else to do. You know, she's actually an air hostess. She's gone back to work full time, but she's picked the routes that she wants to do. So she's off to sort of New York, Barbados, and she's loving it. But she had the flexibility. There wasn't this, I've got to stay in this job that I hate. Because she was an air hostess years ago and then wanted to do something different and hated it. But again, sometimes you do need to get advice, and it is hard because I realize we cost people money, but we can actually show you where you are. And I think I said, earlier in this episode that a lot of what I do is I do a retirement overview. I'm not telling them that I'm going to move this, do that. I'm showing them what you have and what it's going to give you. I'll give you some ideas as to what I think you can do. But if you just want that as a standalone piece of advice that I've given you a report that shows you, absolutely fine with me, because they've gone away and they've then got motivation to do or come back or whatever's right for them. But until you're in an informed position, you've got mixed.
Yes. Yeah. A little knowledge goes a long way. And also, I don't think people think about retirement in the same way anymore, do they? I always think it's the date. It's the date from which you have complete choice, as you say, whether you want to go part-time or open your surf shop or lie in bed and do nothing for the rest of your life, whichever you do. But it's the day you have you can choose, can't you? You can choose whether to stay in that grotty job or change your job.
Options, isn't it?
Or sometimes it's not about giving up work. It's just having the money. You might be happy in your work. You don't want to retire, but you want to use some of your time to do other things. It might to do stuff with your family or kids, or people just have so much more choice now, and which is again makes it even more complicated. But I think there's a lot more flexibility now. I think it's great.
I think that's a good point, and especially what you were saying before about checking in with the numbers each year. So that, because a lot can change in a year. What you want can change in a year, and that can change the numbers. And I don't think it was episode 34, but I know in a previous episode, I mentioned my retirement planning because I left it a tad late. I was late to the pension party, but I'm fully invested now. And I've got my magic spreadsheet. And I think I shared that, like, even though I've left it late, I'm still on track to have £1 million pension pot. And I got all blinded by that shiny thing for a little while. I went, wow, I can't believe you can leave it as late as me and you can still do that. That's insane. And then I sat down and we use software. So I used my software and I thought, you don't actually need £1 million pension pot, Julie. So why wait till you've got £1 million pension pot? I thought, I don't need that much. It's about half that, if even that. I'm like, Oh. And it's so, I keep revisiting it. And in preparation for this episode, I did it the old fashioned way with a quick and dirty spreadsheet. Like if you're sitting there trying to figure out how close am I or have I overshot? So one of the things you could do is like work out what you need in today's terms and then deduct from that whatever your state pension is going to be. So that's 10,600 off it. Any final salary schemes that you might have, little ones, whatever, knock that off it. Any dog walking or soft shop income, knock that off it. Right. And whatever number you've got left, you want to compound that forward to X date by 3%. That's a guess for inflation. That's what I did. And that number, so it's going to be a big number, probably a few 100,000. You want to divide that into 0.04. And that's going to tell you the fund value that you're aiming for. At the 0.04, that's quite contentious, but it's known as this 4% withdrawal, the safe withdrawal rate. We're not going to have a debate whether it's safe or not, but there's this general idea that if you have a pot of money and if all you ever do is take 4% out of it, you do not deplete the pot of money. It can just, you're living off the growth from it. So if you go away and do that calculation and the number that comes back is less than you've already got in your pension, you've done it. You can chuck your job in today. But it'll maybe give you an idea of how far or how close to it you are. Michelle, you look like you've got something to add there.
No, that I actually did that myself. And I think my personal circumstances, I've had a journey through my life. And I then saw what I needed to contribute each month. No, that scared me slightly, but it also gave me a goal to work towards because, well, usually I and we always do things in our job that we don't do in our personal lives. So that's just something that happens. But again, it shows you. So again, using that kind of software, you can show forward exactly, okay, so I can't achieve what that, I should be contributing a month. But if I did this as a sort of a compromise because that's affordable to me, what does that mean?
What difference does that make? Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's the bit that you have to, don't be scared by that number. It's just one of the factors that come into it. And again, there is no bad time to start putting money into your pension, regardless of how much it is.
I think there's another important thing to bear in mind, and that is don't rely on a partner's pension. Just like.
Right. Listeners, if you're listening, you didn't hear me shake my head and go, oh, God, no. It's a visual thing, right? But I think you probably all knew I was doing that. Oddly enough, Sarah, I wrote a blog on this. A man is not a financial plan, nor is a dog. Put a link.
My dog just cost me money, so not a financial plan.
I will put a link to A Man Is Not a Financial Plan in the show notes as well. Yeah, I think that's a really good point.
Or anyone else. Any partner in your life is not a financial plan, but yeah.
Oh, do you know what? I'm having a moment of clarity. That's this year's one. So when I wrote that blog, it was off the back of a conversation you and I had, Sarah.
Oh,
you told, right. So we had a conversation about a woman who years ago saw her husband's financial advisor, I think because she wanted to start saving into her pension. Let's say for argument's sake, she only had £50 a month. Financial advisor.
Yeah.
Financial advisor, £50 a month. It's not worth it. Your husband's got a really good pension. Just rely on him.
Yeah, that is just not a pension. By the time she saw him, she realised she was expecting her first child. At which point he said, "There's no point because £50 a month not worth it." So she ignored it at that point, didn't do anything. Later on, went to see another one, a male, and he still said, "Well, you don't need it because your husband's got a good pension." By the time she'd finished that sentence, I was imploding in all directions. As you can, I think that's how I told you that. We were both imploding in all directions. It's just, I don't want to do the man bashing thing, but traditionally, yes, obviously, in the past, the men earned more. They didn't have gaps in their employment. They tend to have larger pension funds. But equally, depending on the type of the pension they got, there might not be as much, or at least even if it's final salary, it will halve if something happens to them. We do still just about generally live longer. So, if you haven't pushed them downstairs because you can't cope with them in retirement, then you will need, I did that up. You will need your own financial planning and pension, and but it's important for couples in general
Right.
to
So
be
just
aware of
just for clarity then, £50 a month is a perfectly acceptable amount to start a pension
any
on.
amounts, because you
Right.
can start.
Saying to someone that it's not worth it, being a regulated person telling someone it's not worth it, £50 a month, is the stupidest financial advice I've ever heard.
Financial crime, in my opinion.
So like Michelle, what you were saying, when you see it's like going to take a really big number to get to where you want, let's say to work to get what you want, you need to start contributing £1,000 a month right now today. And you're like, holy shit, I can't do that. I can do £50 a month. £50 a month is perfect. Start with the £50 because it's a lot more than a zero. And then my top tip is always then when we get to next year, so you've been putting £50 a month in every month for a year. We get to the anniversary. Can you afford to do £55 a month? Yes, I can. Keep doing that. Next year, can you increase it by another 10%? If you can keep increasing it by 10%, you after the first 5 years, your mind will be blown by how on track you are.
Yeah. But do keep revisiting it. Don't do as a lady I met recently who said, no, I've been really good. I've been saving in a pension. £10 a month, never been reviewed, still £10 a month. She's still done quite well because of the compound growth, because she's been doing it for a long time. But she said, I could easily afford to pay more in, but I didn't really think about it.
Yeah, well, I know when if you listen to Pete Matthews' podcast, I think he says review it every 6 months. So, but the point is review it and increase it when you can and stick with it. It's all these tiny, tiny steps that get us to where we want to be.
It's worth noting as well that if you start pension contributions, it's important to, yes, try and keep them going, and it's important to increase them. But if life really throws you a shitty curveball, you can pause them. You can reduce them, as long as you remember to go back and restart or increase when you can. It's it can move with you.
I don't know about yourselves, but I know that what I've found, as I say, self-confessed late to the pension party, but I don't know, part of it's a mindset thing as well. Because when I was younger, so I've got so much money coming in a month, and my priority was to enjoy myself and to pay my bills. Sometimes in that order. But as I've got a little bit older, and I like the way I look at my pension contribution now, it's the priority that it takes. It's like a non-negotiable now. And I don't know if that became because I started with small regular amounts and I kept at it and I proved to myself, look, I can do this planning for retirement thing. So I'm more bought into that being a monthly outgoing that I have. So it's as essential as paying the mortgage, paying the council tax. Do I want more takeaway this month or do I want to go on a shopping splurge? No, I want to do my pension. So I don't know if it's about doing that small regular bit at the start just builds a habit and a belief in yourself that this is something I want to do and I can do and is important to me.
Also, if you like the spontaneous stuff and you like having fun, do you want that to stop when you can't work anymore? No. So you need to take a little bit of fun away now so that you can continue to have fun for as long as you are able.
I'm not that spontaneous, Sarah. I know.
I know I am.
What about yourself, Michelle? What are you thinking?
Yeah, it's a habit forming, isn't it? So if you can form the habit and you start doing it, and I think as you know, one of my bugbears is the education. If we educated people when they were at school how important this is and what is needed, particularly because we're in a different generation to our parents, that we wouldn't have the issues that we have, and it would be second nature. It would be like paying your gas bill, your electric bill, your water bill. You would do it automatically. We have auto enrollment, but there are failings within how that works and what it's based on. I think Australia, it's mandatory that you have to, and they don't have the same issues we have. So it's habit forming. And as you say, the small amount can help you start that habit. It becomes normal. If I look at how much my gas and electric bill is at this precise moment in time, And then I look at, my pension and you go, actually, what's more important? Yes, I need my gas and electric, but if it's okay to pay that for that, why am I not paying that into my pension?
Yeah.
And then my gas and electric bill, just for record, has tripled in the last 6 months. So in terms of that, that's non-negotiable. I can't not have it. It should be the same mindset for pensions.
Well, that's a good point. I like that. And as I say, like, I'm living proof that it can build that habit and the belief, because it wasn't there, but now it is really there. So as we just start to wrap things up, we started out with saying, like, well, how much do you need for retirement? Hopefully you've got some ideas and some rules of thumb now on how to start applying this to your life. So Sarah, is there any kind of the last thoughts or tips that you would share with the listeners on this topic?
Just start. Don't be afraid. And you've listened to, well, Julie and Michelle have said none of us have been brilliant about our pension savings. We've had all sorts of different things go on in our lives that have meant we haven't done as much or started or perhaps considered. So never feel guilty. Just start. Don't be afraid to just have a look and start. And once you start that habit, as we've been saying, it becomes a lot easier.
All right. Thank you. Michelle.
Sarah said it's starting it. And if you want a rule of thumb, so there's one we haven't kind of talked about as we've gone through as to how much you want to contribute. If you're sat there going, well, I could do 50, I could do 100, I could do 150, and just thinking, do I just pluck a figure out of the air? There is another sort of rule of thumb that's out there that is you look at how old you are, half it, and that's the percentage of your salary that should be going into your pension each year. So it just gives you an idea that, again, the earlier you start, the easier that habit forming becomes, because obviously it's a much lower percentage when you're younger. If you get older, it's a much more uphill battle, but it does give you a starting point. If you're sat there going, what you've all talked about all these numbers, which one do I pick? Just gives you a bit of guidance. It's not going to give you anything guaranteed, but it just gives you a place to start thinking.
All right. I think that's a great one. And then I think what my parting sort of bit would be, it's going back to what Michelle said about one of the services she offers. Like, if you don't want the full on all singing and dancing advice, but as that you'll sit and help people just figure out where am I at and what will that do. So I think there's that. And then another plug for Pete Matthew, just because we love him anyway, is you've got his Meaningful Money Academy. And if you pay for that and you go into it, they will give you access to Voyant, which is the bit of software that I use for all this stuff. So that's just another way you can go and get your hands on some information to start playing around with this. If you're not ready to come and talk to a financial advisor, that's one option. Or maybe you're just right into figuring it all out yourself because you like that. Then I would suggest that. But as always, there are lots of lovely advisors out there that don't join in the Moment and Money Cafe podcast, oddly enough. But there's also us as well, Michelle, our pension guru. So any questions or you just want to get a bit of a handle on this, then do reach out to us and we would love to help. But Michelle, thank you so much for your contribution. That was awesome.
Yep.
All right, Sarah, thank you for threatening violence on an episode. It's been a while since we've had that.
I'm so sorry.
That's okay. You were pushing people down the stairs, but we know that you were joking.
Okay.
A valuable contribution. Thank you to you for listening to us. And as always, we really, really do appreciate it because our download numbers have skyrocketed over the last few months. And that is all thanks to you for sharing the show and talking about it with your friends. And we really appreciate it. And all the reviews that you leave us. So until next time, take care of yourself.